is our last time with Galatians. Next quarter, it will be, we're going to have Joshua and Ruth will be the study, and our starship leader will be Bergen Connor, who is going to shape our spiritual formation. And, but however, I'm sorry to tell you this, he won't be here next week. So yeah, that's always great. The guy who puts this thing together is out when it first starts. So I will be back next week, bringing you the introduction to the next quarter. And then in the quarter, Matt, are we going to do second, you're going to do second Samuel, is that right?
Bergen is reconsidering. He's kind of got looking at a couple other things, so we really haven't decided the summer part of it yet.
Okay, all right. Well, it's too early to decide summer. Besides that, as soon as we get it decided, they'll undecided and leave. Okay, so here we go. Today we're at chapter 6, and I think it's in the NIV. The heading is "Doing Good to All" as we start 6:1, and I think that's basically what he's tying all of this together. But he still has to talk about circumcision and the law, because the law is still a problem, and he wants to address it as he closes it out. He starts out with brothers and sisters, which is better than "you foolish Galatians." But if someone is caught in sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. And there's some very important things there. If someone is caught in sin, and that is succumbing to temptation, and that is something that can happen and does happen, we know that. But if someone is caught in sin, you who live by the Spirit, notice it's not you who live by the Mosaic law, it is you who live by the Spirit. And that's who should, at this point, that's who should be restoring someone gently. And the gently is an important part too. And sometimes it can be hard to do it gently because the person who has succumbed to sin does not want to hear about it. Does not want to hear about it. And it could be a challenging thing. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Now, the idea is we don't want to help someone and then end up they do more to us than we do to them in terms of restoring. They restore us to the new thing there. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. I think it's very important that we need to be, and this is kind of interesting with what Dale talked about this morning, and that is how we love each other, but the loving is sometimes bearing burdens with them and carrying those burdens. And I know some of you may, as parents and grandparents, may have had children who have strayed away, and you have worked very hard and waited very patiently and worked with them, and you're carrying that burden. Or you may have a friend or a coworker or a boss or somebody like that, or a neighbor or a fellow member of the congregation bearing those burdens. When Mac leads prayer here every Sunday morning, there are a lot of burdens out there. Dale's surgery, I mean, he's facing major surgery, if you will. So it's a burden that we should bear as well. So for those who don't know it, I think it's the prostate cancer surgery, right? Yeah, that's what it is. And anytime you mention the big C, not the big D, we all know that's Dallas, but cancer is, it gets your attention. If anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Now, again, that I believe is directed at those who were teaching the law, because he leaves them out of this. Those people who are driven by the Spirit, those members, those brothers and sisters, faithful, believing members should be the ones who bear the burdens and not those who adhere to the law of Moses. Each one of you should test their own actions. And this is kind of interesting. We have done away with he and she in the New International Version that this is, but when it says each one should, they, you go from singular to plural. I've had English teachers in high school and in junior high school who would put a big red line there and take us down for it because we are not, it should be either they and their, we're not one. Okay, thank you for that. They should, each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. For each one should carry their own load. Now that's kind of interesting because the word there, pride, take pride. What do we usually think of when we think of someone who is taking pride? Boastful, a show off, not humble. You know, it's like that.
You can take pride in things, just don't go overboard with it.
That's it. You can, or any of you, I want a show of hands, please vote, because we're going to hold the vote, okay? This is early voting. How many of you are proud of your children? One, okay. We understand. Okay, you pride and your grandchildren. And you may take pride in other things that you do. Pride in yourself for doing something. It is not wrong unless it becomes a, you're not going to believe what I did. I am so great. Pat me on the back. Or something like that. I mean, if that's the attitude, that is the pride that we don't want. The overboard pride. So don't go overboard. Okay. And if you're in a boat, please don't go overboard either. That's not recommended. All right. That's your safety message for today. Nevertheless, the one who receives instruction in the word should share all things with their instructor. Now, what does that mean? The instructor is supposed to instruct us, right? And share with you that knowledge, right? What is it talking about here, though? What is Paul talking about here?
Appreciation.
There you go, appreciation. And how do we show appreciation? One of the texts I looked at said, in that day, they would share, because they didn't have paid ministers as such, or instructors, they would give food or whatever they could, give shelter, whatever, as a payment for it, so that they share all good things with their instructor. It can also mean the good things they could be sharing could be their understanding of the word. When we're here in this class, I ask for your comments, and many of you have much better comments than I gave out. So that's why, that's the sharing that we might be talking about as well. But in the old days of some churches of Christ, the minister and the family lived out of the blessing center. That's where they had to get all of the things because they were paid so little. We can't pay him that much. So we also want to make sure that we do take care of the instructors and their needs.
Jim, as a teacher, I never know whether I'm getting through unless I get a response.
Okay.
And some of the best encouragement that I've received as a teacher is the people who come up after class and you know what in the lesson is left with them if they're going to come up and talk to you after class about it and stuff. And so and some people don't want to share in a large setting, but they'll share in a private setting. That's important to the
Yes, that's important. That's very
feedback
good.
to receive.
And I will share with you in front of everybody. Thank you for that. That is very good comment. All right. All right, we're at good things with their instructor. Now, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Now, what does all of that mean? It seems like it's kind of like this is rule number one. Do not be deceived. That's rule number one. Rule number two is God cannot be mocked. And number three, a man reaps what he sows. Let's start with God cannot, do not be deceived. What is he referring to? And I think we could say he has been saying it all throughout the first 5 chapters of Galatians, or all throughout that portion of the letter, because he has been talking about false teachings, and that is the return and the belief in, well, circumcision, and also that we should follow the law of Moses. That has been at the epicenter, or the central part of his letter to them, because that's what they have done. And
Well,
they're
I
not
also
alone.
think you're probably talking to people who are not necessarily truthful in what they say. They say, "Oh, you taught a great lesson," but don't actually believe it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Or they're not true
Yeah.
to the
They're-
teaching.
They're just kind of,
Yeah, they're
Guilty
just kind of
away.
mouthing what they want.
yeah. Oh, that was a great sermon, brother so-and-so. Well, I guess it was because you slept through it, but that can happen, I guess. That's a good point. God cannot be mocked. What is he talking about there?
You can't fool God.
You can't fool God. Exactly. Anybody who has tried to do that knows it doesn't work. All right. A man reaps what he sows. Now, this is, of course, we understand that it is a metaphor, an agricultural metaphor, which most of the people to whom he's writing here in Galatia would have probably some connection with agriculture in that area. So this is something you would understand. If you don't sow something, you're not going to reap it. I always want a beautiful lawn, but I do absolutely nothing to get it other than water it. But I'm not sowing anything. So I reap an ugly lawn. Okay? And you can see that is what he's talking about. What we focus on and what we have as important and what we work on is what we're going to reap. If, and the parenthesis, and this is a parenthesis, if we are working on following the law of Moses, then that's what we're going to reap. And he has been on that over and over throughout the time that we've been doing this. Any comments on that?
Can I go back to the mocking God?
Go back to where?
Mocking God.
Okay.
I was just pulling up comparative verses on there, and in the NLT, which I guess that's New Living Testament. Don't be misled. You cannot mock the justice of God.
Okay. Very good. Very good.
It's
The
a
justice. Can't mock the justice of God. If we think we can get, basically, if we think we can get away with it, we're mocking God's justice because it's going to come. He knows. Very good point. Thank you. And you're new to this class, aren't you, sir? Have you been, have you been introduced before? I would say it's the Pope Catholic, but that would be, we won't go down that road.
No, he's not.
All right. It's good to see you, though. A man reaps what he sows. Whoever sows to please their flesh, that is, what's the flesh is the sinful nature, right? So if we are doing things to feed our sinful nature, that is to continue in those sinful activities, That's what we're going to reap. We will reap, as it says here, we'll reap destruction. And when we're talking about destruction, what does that mean? Does it mean if I sin right now, instantly I'm going to be hit by lightning? No. What is Paul talking about here? Eternal, absolutely. That's the destruction, and that destruction is eternal. So it lasts forever. And then it says, whoever sows to please the Spirit, the Spirit, and we talked about that. It may be who lets the Spirit lead in life is what we're talking about. And we're also talking about following the Spirit or letting Him lead us. Let the Spirit lead us in our lives. From the Spirit will reap eternal life. So that's when we went back to the destruction is eternal life, but it's not going to be in heaven. This is going to be eternal life in heaven. That we get from the Spirit. Let us not become weary in doing good. How hard can that sometimes be?
Pretty hard sometimes.
What's that?
Pretty hard sometimes.
Yes?
Because all around you, everybody's trying to teach you worldly things instead of spiritual things.
Right. And then sometimes, has anybody ever worked out at Blessing Center for any period of time? Yes. Sometimes you can get into it happened to me. I got to the point to where I was so tired of seeing the same people over and over again. Okay, so I had to do an attitude adjustment, so I just backed out of it so we don't have an explosion. We don't want to have that. But sometimes we do become weary doing good. All right, any comments on that? You're all some of you are shaking your heads like this, others of you are asking, thinking, what am I going to have for lunch?
Well, I also taught Head Start, and it was really hard to see those little kids have nothing because the parents either didn't work or were on drugs. But you get to, in Head Start, you at least get to love the children and give them a lot, all you can give them.
Sure.
And so I would get tired sometime of seeing how the parents treated their child.
Right.
And how they lived.
That's a very good point.
Or sometimes you just don't see a change even though you've been teaching them over and over.
Because they spend more time with their parents than they do with the teacher most of the time. Yes, sir.
In our world, we're tuned to response to numbers. And sometimes when we put together something and think, well, nobody shows up, that must not be any good, and stuff. And we tend to judge what we do by some number, by how much money we raise, by how many people show up, by how many people respond to this and everything. And I had a wise elder tell me when I first went into ministry that numbers are not important. That whatever's raised is that many more pennies, that many more dollars toward helping something. Whoever shows up are the people that need it.
Right.
And so doing good can be a huge program, but doing good can be the effect on one child,
right,
one person.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? All right. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Now, what are we talking about there? Again, he uses the agricultural example but he's not talking about literally going out into the field and harvesting. What is he talking about there? No matter how difficult it is to be doing good, we will be rewarded for doing it. Because one of the problems I had, and I'll share this with you, you can throw whatever you want at me as long as it's not going to hurt me. But one of the things that I would have a problem with is waiting on people who are getting food, who have more tattoos on their bodies, and tattoos are not cheap, and they reek of cigarette smoke.
They have fancy phones.
What's that?
They have fancy phones.
Well, they could have fancy phones. They have probably fancier than mine, but I'm so stupid, I don't need a fancier phone. I just need an easy to operate phone. But the point is, we have to work through that. In fact, one time, let me give you this, and it'll be the last time I'll get off my soapbox. But one time I had this elderly lady who was very much infirmed, and I carried all of her stuff out for her, opened the door to a Chevrolet Suburban, and there were 3 grandsons or grandchildren in there smoking cigarettes. So they're probably living off granny, and they're not going to help her. But anyway, we still do it. We don't say, all right, that's it. We still do it, but we're human. And okay, enough of the soapbox.
Yeah.
We will now return to regular programming.
I think it's important. It doesn't say you will be given a harvest. It doesn't say you will be blessed in a harvest. It says you will reap a harvest, and that's an action word.
Mm-hmm.
To receive a harvest, we got and do something.
Yes.
We have to actually be receiving it.
Right. Very good. All right. Now back to verse 9 there, or verse 10. Therefore, as we have the opportunity, let us do good to all people. And again, as I said, it can be difficult to do it for all, but that's what our mission is. Especially, however, to those who belong to the family of believers, or some versions say the household of faith. They're talking about the church members. And sometimes we've seen, I've seen instances of this, and I'm sure you have, that the congregation, some people in the congregation don't think that the treasury, the church treasury, like it's got a whole bunch of money in it, is for purposes of helping others. It's to pay the preacher, build the building, pay the rent, whatever we have to do, but it is not to help others. It's not to help children's homes. It's not to help send a member to, at that time, Bear Valley was a big operation out west where it was the equivalent of what went on or goes on at Sunset. But we got into a huge argument over that. We cannot pay to send somebody to Bear Valley to become a minister or to he was already a minister, but to enhance his skills. So this can be a good thing here, and it can also be something that causes people to split. Any comments on that?
Thank goodness we're not doing it now. We're helping when we can. And we're not fussing about sending somebody to be a better preacher and there's always a deal where they send any of the teachers to special learning activities and they pay for it.
Right. And we here have every September, we have a program for teachers to help us get better at what we do. And some of us are just so far gone. It's just not going to happen.
This is
Don't get me laughing. I won't stop.
Well,
this
it's
verse
better than
is,
crying.
Oh, it is. It is.
Yes,
this
sir.
verse is complimentary of the church.
And how so?
Well,
expand on that.
it makes the church better going through this generosity.
Yes.
But you have to be careful to who you or what you donate to. Because there's some scams out there too that you have to watch out for, or some programs that sound good, but if you look closer, aren't good. So you really have to be careful.
Right.
To those who say we shouldn't donate to outsiders, I point them to the many, many examples in the prophets
Yeah,
that talk about social justice.
yeah. And another thing that comes up with, and this is an aside from this. If you're contributing to charitable organizations, there is a website, it has the word navigators in it, but what it will tell you is how much of what is contributed is distributed for the program, and how much that is contributed is given to the financing, the advertising of the program, and for the CEO. And there are some, for example, I was very surprised to find one of the charitable organizations I give to, it's a veterans organization, but the chair, the CEO, makes $350,000 a year. And I'm thinking, good night, we could help a lot of the wounded warriors if we spend it on them, but it's still a good program. And then there are others where we had an incident, we had an investigation that was conducted by the Army Times in probably 1980s about some of these military, everybody was setting up their own I'm helping the military. We had this one group, you know what they gave the soldiers? They gave them pairs of socks. Well, they can get that somewhere else. So a lot of the money that was going, then they had this group of paralyzed veterans, and they were helping those who've been paralyzed. The CEO made $250,000 a year, but to show that he was a very generous person, the CFO also got $250,000 a year and happened to be his wife. So some of those organizations, I think you just finally say, no, thank you. All right, now I'm back on this. I'm on
So
this.
a rule of thumb is 25% for administration and no more.
Yeah.
You should not
And-
support anybody that.
And when you consider what those were, it's not good, some of them. All right, anyway, now, not circumcision, but the new creation. This is the title of the rest of the book. At verse 11, see what large letters I write to you with my own hand. Now, what do we do? Usually if we put it in all caps and bold, what do we want people to think about that when we send them something?
You're shouting at them.
What's that?
You're shouting at them.
You're shouting at them.
Pay attention.
Yeah, pay attention.
Or he can't see very well and writes with.
Sir, do you have another class you would like to go on to? We can arrange a transfer. That's true, because that's what the commentators say about this. It could be that the affliction that Paul had may have been bad eyesight. Or I think more likely it is that he wants us to pay close attention to what follows. Those who want to impress people by means of the flesh are trying to compel you to be circumcised. He comes back to the circumcision message as he closes out this letter. And they basically, those who by means of the flesh, what does he mean by that?
The old law.
What's that?
The old law.
Well, by means of the flesh would be the sinning. They're sinning when they do this, trying to convince them
Oh, okay.
that the circumcision is important. And why? What did we study about circumcision It is the beginning of doing what? Following the Mosaic law.
Yeah.
And that is where the problem comes in, because the Mosaic law, when he's writing this, and today, is not in force and effect. Okay? So, any other comments about that?
He's basically trying to free them from the Mosaic law, trying to say, you don't have to do this anymore.
Right.
You know, you just have to follow the spiritual law, Christ's law.
Right.
You're not shackled to all these commandments anymore.
That's right. And the word shackled was used when he referred to being shackled by the law of Moses. We're not shackled by it. Now, are there some good things in this to follow? Yeah, don't kill anybody. Don't murder anybody. Don't rob anybody. Don't cheat on your wife or your husband. Don't do all of these other things. And the first three commandments deal with God. He is the one and only in both. In both. But it doesn't mean that we follow the Passover and all of that sort of meat on the Sabbath and that sort of thing and go nowhere on the Sabbath and what it came to be. Those who want to impress people are trying to compel you to be circumcised. The only reason they do this is to avoid being persecuted for the cross of Christ. Now, what does that mean? What is he saying there?
Well, those that believed in the Jewish system were persecuting Christians because they didn't keep the law of Moses.
Right.
And that's the reason that they were trying to prevent a lot of people from
Right.
finding fault with the church.
Right, that is what he's basically saying. The only reason they do this is to avoid being persecuted for the cross of Christ. They want to stay in good standing with the law of Moses, so they, as they're being persecuted. We know that Jews were persecuting Christians at that time. The Roman government was persecuting them. In fact, some of the Roman emperors were some of the worst persecutors in the history of the world. And as a result, he wanted to make sure that he brings that up. Not even those who are circumcised keep the law. All right, we know that. We know from the beginning that it was impossible to keep it. Yet they want you to be circumcised, that they may boast about your circumcision in the flesh. May I never boast except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom the world has been crucified to me and I to the world. Neither circumcision nor uncircumcision means anything. What counts is new creation. So it doesn't get any plainer than that. Peace and mercy to all who follow this rule, to the Israel of God. For now, from now on, let no one cause me trouble, for I bear on my body the marks of Jesus. What's he talking about there? Okay, let's turn over to 1 Corinthians 9. 1 Corinthians 9, for those of you who have the book, you have to thumb through it. For those of you who have and we'll start at verse 11. Start at verse 11. I'm sorry, wait a minute. I'm going to make it go around here. No, this is the one we want. 2 Corinthians 11. 2 Corinthians is right after 1 Corinthians. So if you were at 1 Corinthians, you don't have far to go. 2 Corinthians 11, verses 16 through 33. This is everybody knows this. And it's entitled, Paul Boasts About His Sufferings. I repeat, let no one make me for a fool, but if you do, then tolerate me just as you would a fool, so that I may do a little boasting. In this self-confident boasting, I am not talking as the Lord would, but as a fool. Since many are boasting in the way the world does, I too will boast. You gladly put up with fools since you are so wise. In fact, you even put up with anyone who enslaves you or exploits you or takes advantage of you or puts airs or slaps in your face. To my shame, I admit that we were too weak for that. Now, he's also talking about getting along with the Roman government, because that's a very important thing. Whatever anyone else dares to boast about, I am speaking as a fool. I also dare to boast about it. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Wasn't he? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they Abram's descendants? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I am out of my mind to talk like this. I am more. And what he is talking about here is he was the Pharisee of Pharisees. He said that. He even held the cloaks and the garments of those who stoned Stephen. And some say he may have actually thrown some stones. And what was he on his way to Damascus to do? For a weekend holiday in Damascus? I don't think so. He was there to put men and women of the way in jail or prison. I have worked much harder, been in prison more frequently, been flogged more severely, been exposed to death again and again. And I think he's probably saying, I'm tired of hearing this complaining. Folks, I have 5 times I have received from the Jews 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. Would you like to be his medical insurances? There. All right. Come on now. Well, this is not coming apart. There we go. 3 times I was shipwrecked. What does that teach us? Don't take a ship. I spent a night and a day in the open sea. Not very many people can claim that. I have been constantly on the move. I've been in danger from rivers, danger from bandits, in danger from my fellow Jews, in danger from the Gentiles. And he's God's messenger to the Gentiles. In danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, in danger from false believers. They were persecuting him for that. They did not believe what he was teaching. I have labored and toiled and have often gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst and have often gone without food. I have been cold and naked. Besides everything else, I face daily pressure of my concern for all the churches. And there is one of the things that he still does. I think he is concerned with the various congregations, and of course, the Corinthian church was one of them. They had some very serious problems. Who is weak? I do not feel weak. Who is led into sin? And I do not inwardly burn. If I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. The God and Father of the Lord Jesus, who is to be praised forever, knows that I am not lying. In Damascus, the governor under King had the city of Damascus guarded in order to arrest me. But I was lowered in a basket from the window in the wall and slipped through their hands. So even when so what he is basically saying is, he's kind of venting, I should say, he's venting himself, tired of hearing about all of this. He's been through a great deal. Okay, with that, any questions or closing comments? Remember, next week we start Joshua. It'll just be an introduction. So It shouldn't be too difficult. Will be a test afterwards. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.